Get the recording started and we will get ready to go. Thank you everybody for joining us today on behalf of the National Career Development Association. Welcome to NCDA's webinar series. We are pleased that you have joined us. Before I introduce our presenter today, I wanted to share some technical information for you. During the webinar, your microphone will be muted. We encourage any questions to be typed into the chat section, which can be found on the lower section of your screen. Our presenter will address those questions as we go through the webinar. Individuals who have signed up for this webinar can log into their account on the NCDA website to view their CEU certificates beginning next week. Groups that are attending will need to return their sign-in sheets to me in order to receive certificates. This program is approved for 1 contact hour of continuing education. For any questions on continuing education, you can contact me. My name is Alicia Cheek. I'm with NCDA headquarters, and my contact information was included in your webinar instructions email. Our presenter today is Ed Hidalgo, the Chief Innovation and Engagement Officer at the Cajon Valley Union School District in San Diego, California. We now present integrating career-related learning into the world of K-12.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you to those of you who have joined today. I know there's just so much happening in our worlds, and for you to even carve out a little bit of time to learn about career-related learning in the early grades certainly does mean a lot, and it's work that we care about. And if you care about this work, I'm going to do everything I can today to help you at least in a perspective on how our amazing teachers are exploring this in our school district. I can't think of a more important focus in education at this time, especially with the level of uncertainty that so many people are experiencing, the importance of having a coach, having a career counselor, a career development professional working with you to help you see your way through this time of struggle, helping you develop a vision of your future possible self. And some of that is what we'll be talking about today. I actually went back to a book that I've been reading by Dr. David Bluestein. Perhaps some of you have read it, The Importance of Work in an Age of Uncertainty. It was just released, I believe, last summer. And Dr. Bluestein is a friend of our district. And as I was flipping through this concept of time perspective, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, and maybe you have questions in your own mind today around understanding the time perspective of us as humans. You know, how can this work happen in the early grades? How can this be effective in the early grades? Well, and I love this quote from Dr. Bluestein, that one of the most important aspects of planning a work life of meaning and satisfaction is to be able to envision oneself in the future. In effect, to develop a long-term future orientation. And I guess I'll challenge each of you on the call today to think back to your little selves, yourselves as a child, wherever it was that you were. And when were those moments that, knowing yourself today, that there were glimpses of your future possible self? And who was there supporting you? Who was there speaking into you, really investing in you and helping you start to develop a language around your possible self, encouraging you in what was possible? And I think that's what our work is about today. And so I wish I could share this video of 2 students at one of our schools, Anza Elementary. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll be able to see it. We weren't able to have it run here on this session. But the gentleman to the left, Rayshawn, is a 5th grader. And I hope that you will go and see the video, or I will add it in my video links that I'll be sharing through Alicia and NCDA. But Rayshawn talks about the importance of the RIASEC and how it should be taught in school, how it's helping him understand his place in the world. He challenges principals to ensure that all students have the opportunity to learn about themselves and really have this opportunity to develop a language around the RIASEC. And I'm sure most of you on this call know the RIASEC, and if you don't, you will by the end of this, our time together. And I look forward to you asking questions in the Q&A chat box as we move through. But coming off of Rayshawn's really elegant explanation of why it's important to him. I remember also to Dr. Mark Savickas' comments, and specifically this quote at the 2013 NCDA commencement, his address, that said, "The self that a person makes themselves into is a function of language. If you don't have a word for it, you don't have it." And in my mind, that is a gift that we've given to Cajon and to his classmates. They're developing a language of who they are and who they want to become. They're using the wonderful language that comes from career development researchers like Dr. Savickas, like Dr. Bluestein, and many before them, so that they can understand who they are and who they want to become, where they might fit in the world. And we know from a very early age that students start to understand the world, recognize the world around them, and start making choices from the various earliest of ages. And so for me, doing this work in Cajon Valley, it's a gift because I get gifts like this, the RIASEC and Hi, Mr. Hidalgo from first graders who are starting to learn the language of interest in particular, that are starting to see that people believe that there's a place in the world for them, and really in the early grades, introducing play and enjoyment around language and around understanding that each of us is uniquely special. Each of us have unique interests that are different from our classmates, and each of us can help each other be successful in whatever it is that we're doing. So that is the journey that I want us to be on today. And as a little bit of background, my journey into the world of education is a little atypical in that I spent 20 years hiring talent. And I've hired all the way from a custodian to a senior vice president, and for many large corporations. And I love the idea of work. I didn't love the struggle of watching people struggle, find their place in the world. Hiring tens of thousands of people, you start to hear their stories. And what was always so surprising was how many people had never experienced a career development conversation, had never had the time to sit down with someone to explore their unique strengths, interests, and values. So my opportunity to really go deep into this work from that lens of hiring, and then starting 2 20% time projects that you see off to the right. First, starting a career counseling practice with some of my amazing colleagues at Qualcomm for many of the engineers that we had hired there at the company. Many thousands of them came through this practice, and I really had the opportunity to go deep into understanding and studying the research behind strengths, interests, and workplace values, and then adapting it to a makerspace that we created. Again, another amazing group of talented human resources professionals that helped us to create this makerspace for middle school students, grades 6th, 7th, and 8th, to have a hands-on experience with engineering, but also to learn about the world of work and also to learn about their unique strengths, interests, and values. Mind you that many of those students, they thought the company Qualcomm just a stadium, and many of them had no idea that the world's largest fabless semiconductor company was right in their own backyard. So this question evolved: how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? And it was that work, aligning my own RIASEC interests, my strengths, and my workplace values, and meeting a very unique and special superintendent, that I make the shift to working in Cajon Valley. So you know a little bit about us, and certainly now is a very challenging time, but the steps that our district has taken over the past 6 years to prepare our students for this moment has been instrumental in our ability to continue to provide educational services to our students. As you can see, it's a significant population, but each one of our students has Chromebooks. Each of our students is in a one-to-one environment, which is allowing them to continue with learning in different ways, directed by their teachers. And of course, we're all learning about how education will evolve in this new kind of environment that we're living in, but also including other elements such as running a TEDx Kids and having one of the first computer science STEM magnet schools. All of these things have really played into the work that we're doing today and serving this very important population of students. It's a wonderfully diverse population, from low SES to high SES. And really our belief is that career development is important for all students, all grades, all socioeconomic levels, because it really is about building identity and helping every child find their place in the world. For us, and I do want to share some of these elements as well, we talk a bit about zip code destiny, being one of the highest poverty school districts out of 43 in our region. We look at the research from Dr. Chetty in particular. I'm sharing this because if you haven't heard this podcast, I highly recommend it. Zip Code Destiny, part of Hidden Brains podcast series with Dr. Raj Chetty. He talks about the fading American dream. It's an important data point to understand as it relates to where our students are headed, what the role of education and what's happening for students, and why this work is so incredibly important. And as we build off of the knowledge of that concept of zip code destiny, there's another bit of language that I want you to be familiar with, and it's this concept of opportunity youth. Across the nation, there's more than 5 million opportunity youth. In San Diego County, there's 1,000 approximately, 16 to 24-year-olds that are not in school and not working. And in our school district, we were 5th on the list. Now, our school district is a K-8. Our students relate into a high school district, so we don't have control over the entire K-12 experience. But our superintendent and our board would articulate that we were part of the issue. We weren't creating a clear vision for our students to understand how to matriculate into post-secondary education and see a path to gainful employment. So that's when our board took what I would say drastic and focused measures to ensure that a career development framework was designed in our classrooms for every child, every grade, and every year. Without our trustees, this would not be possible. Without our superintendent asking the question, what is school for? And this is a screen capture of a tweet that was captured where he stated, I thought that my job was to prepare kids to get good test scores, then go to college. Then I realized this was malpractice. We now work on having every child's teacher, K-12, become their career counselor. And I know what he was saying there was really around having them become their career coach. And Dr. Miyashiro, incredibly successful at rising test scores. He took a failing school and took it to the highest measures in our state, California. They were going to close this school. He played the game around test scores. And the challenge for him was, and for his teachers, is when they saw these students years later, they were still in generational poverty, matriculated into gang environments, and they really weren't changing their lives. They weren't changing their trajectory. And when I met Dr. Miyashiro while I was at Qualcomm at the Think a Bit lab, that's when our two worlds collided. And he asked me, how could we do this for all of our students instead of just doing it on a one-day field trip? As I joined Cajon Valley, I learned more about their vision, a vision of developing happy kids and healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. So much research that's connected to each of those words. This is actually our boardroom. We won't be there tonight. We'll be in a virtual board meeting, and really, you know, bringing together this idea of education and the world of work. How do we bring both of those elements together? Knowing that in our district, we were already deploying a modern curriculum so that every student would gain access to computer science through code.org, would participate in presentation literacy in every class, that every child would have exposure to social emotional learning through Sanford Harmony and some of our own design products. But that fourth element was the one that was missing, this idea of the world of work. How do we integrate career development for every child, every grade, and every year? So I left Qualcomm and we worked on a theory of change and theory of action, this idea of the students, teachers, and parents oftentimes not understanding what's happening with the evolving world of work, this amazing, number two, underutilized body of K-16 career development research, and this third item, really a need for a systemic career development implementation. So we say every child, every grade, every year. That's our lens. And fortunately for me, when I went to the University of San Diego to spend a year there, I got to work with Dr. Ian Martin. And Dr. Martin drove kind of the practical elements and research and design that I had been doing in the corporate world into a framework that would do no harm for kids and would actually develop, in many ways, this idea of a protective factor around mental health, and on the negative side and on the positive side, truly help students develop a vision of their future possible selves. And many of you, hopefully on the line, you're familiar with many of these theorists and social cognitive theory and the strengths piece, obviously lifespan through Dr. Super, and the concept of foreclosure with Linda Gottfredson, Oysterman's work, and I know there was some previous work done starting in '84 around this idea of possible selves. I really like Dr. Oysterman's work out of USC. Of course, Dr. Bluestein's work on the psychology of working, decent work, and dignified work, what's important there. Certainly huge as it relates to what's happening in our economy right now in our country. How are we going to come out of this? How will we create more dignified jobs? Will we look at the gig workforce in a different way? And how will our students prepare for those elements in the future of world work? And of course, grounding with Holland. And for some of you might not be familiar, but the theory of work adjustment, and that's where we kind of ground in that concept of workplace values. Really important theory, and really important career theories that weren't meant necessarily to be applied independently of each other. They're actually beautifully connected. When you bring the theories together, you can build a framework of understanding. Don't use them separately, or they're not meant to stand alone. And that's something Dr. Martin and I always used to talk about. He was an amazing mentor for me and continues to be so in this day. At the same time, our work isn't the only work that's focusing and looking at young people as it relates to their careers. There's some great work happening out in the world of work currently, some in Canada in this early years from CEREC out of Canada. I highly recommend you check it out. And then out of the UK, some of the work happening from the Education and Employers Group around drawing the future. So go check out those things. What really impacted me through looking at what's happening around the globe and some great work in Australia, New Zealand, UK, and Canada, and other places. But really this quote by Andreas Schleicher, if you don't know him, you should go look at some of his TED Talks. But for him to say that giving children a better sense of the world of work is not just a matter of social justice, it is also a matter of bringing the potential of the next generation fully to bear. I mean, what a poignant statement, knowing that where we are today and the fullest potential. In El Cajon, where I work, there's so much potential. I see the talent in these young people. It's unbelievable. Talent is found everywhere, but opportunity is not. How do we bring opportunity to all students? And I would say, even in the high SES areas of our communities, that while opportunity may seem present, there are many things that many students are not getting. And one of those elements is career development. So as we head closer now to our frameworks, I want to ground for a moment in an element that is core to our work. This idea that career development is a human process. We've had career development tools for decades. They've been in our schools, and they're very much tech-driven. And our perspective is that there's nobody better than a teacher to develop a relationship with a child. They have more than 180 days to do it in their school settings. And of course, counselors are an incredible complement, but also play a much more distant role. And our failure has been the lack of integration of career development in our classroom. The reality is, as we deploy many of our high schoolers' career assessments, that my belief is that career development through an assessment, well, the assessment is only as good as its interpretation. That was a Dr. Martin's quote. And that's why we need to be involved with students, asking them questions, driving reflections, giving them the opportunity to explore the world of work. That's the work of us, the adults. And if we just outsource that to technology, we're never going to get students to the place that we want them to be. And if you're setting up pathways, pathways are great, but how are pathways different than choosing a college major? So you take an assessment, you choose a pathway, and it's kind of this self-service process. But how do we know the student has really self-identified and selected a pathway that's right for them? That's where we as humans come in. This needs to be a human process. And hopefully this environment that we're in currently will drive more human engagement, human relationships, human conversations, and more question asking. career development is a human process. So through that lens and through that work, we decided to develop, while we were at USD, this career development framework. And we call it the mission of me. It's a 3-core process. It's important that you understand these 3 core elements, but it's our belief that every child, every grade, every year should gain a level of self-awareness. They should have the opportunity to learn about their unique strengths, what they do well, their talents. You can tie back to Gallup's research on that, their interests, what they like to do, and their values, why they like to do it, workplace values. So many people shy away from articulating the values conversation. But do you want to go to work in a high-rise, or do you want to go work in the forest? Do you want to work at the beach? Do you want to wear flip-flops? Do you want to lace up? Do you want to wear a tie? Do you want to take a briefcase? Do you want to take a backpack? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to work from your home? More than ever, we have to understand that workplace values are critically important to identifying our best fit in the world of work. And we know that strengths and interests are fairly stable across the lifespan, especially starting in later adolescence. But values we know change across the lifespan. So we should start having a conversation earlier about these elements. Secondly, that every child, every grade, every year should have the opportunity to explore both academic and career opportunities. We call that the journey. And thirdly, this belief that every child should be able to tell their story, not your parents' story, not your grandparents' story, but your own story. And ideally, it would be a blending of their experiences, their education, the development of their skills, and their knowledge of their unique strengths, interests, and values. As a recruiter, I can only imagine how it would feel, and this didn't happen often, but if a candidate could come in and really articulate who they are from this lens of their strengths, interests, and values, how powerful that could be, especially when they make that connection to the job description and what they're applying for. That is where you make those magical connections. And so that's why the work that we're doing is so important. Really, it's that path to gainful employment. So this is the foundation that grounds our work. And I love what Civica says around career construction. Perhaps you heard this before, but the primary concept of self-construction, if you believe in this constructivist model of development, in his words, it begins during childhood as individuals are first actors, then later become agents, and later authors of their own lives and careers. We're helping young people become actors in this journey, and then at some point, they're going to transfer into becoming agents, and then later authors. And that might happen later on down the road, but every child is unique and special. For any child, it could be different. So with that in mind, there are 4 levels of integration to our framework, and we call on our teachers to explore, to simulate, to meet a pro, and to practice. We want this to happen across grade levels, and there are teachers at all levels of this journey. Some teachers are using our frameworks very closely aligned, very closely focused to it. Other teachers have taken our framework and are now designing new ways and new integrations, of course, because teachers are craftsmen and women. They're going to design and build based on their creative genius. We call it #teacher-talent. And we're okay with that. But I'll show you some things that we want to make sure, even through that crafting, that happen through the process. And we're very thankful for the Myers-Briggs company that helps us with exploration, and the NEPRIS organization. I'll share more about them later. When I talk about this framework, what's important for you to know is when we get started on interests. We want teachers, because we understand that teachers, this is new language for them. It might be new language for your counselors as well, but we ground in interests, and we ground specifically through a vocational typology called the RIASEC, which I'm guessing most of you are familiar with. If you're not, it's the most researched of all vocational typologies. It's been around for a long time. And there are so many practical connections in the sense that universities classify majors by the RIASEC, and the ONET, the government's database of jobs, classifies the jobs by the RIASEC. So there's all these very practical applications. And our workforce board here in San Diego is classifying jobs through our priority sectors by the RIASEC. So there's an incredible view for young people to be able to see their possible selves once they start claiming their interests, they can see where they're headed. And really and truly, the second reason, not just because there's this wonderful typology that's created by Dr. Holland, but also because the research shows that interest fit predicts these employment outcomes, have these high correlations with career success, income, and performance, more so than other personality measures. So interest, it just makes sense. And Holland created this beautiful, wonderful, simple framework and model that children understand starting in the earliest ages. So again, we want students to explore a career. We want them to simulate, have as-if experiences. We want them to meet professionals, ideally someone who looks like them in person or virtually. And fourth, we want them to participate in demonstrations of learning or practice or internships, depending on the grade levels. And the way that we get folks started out is through these 54 career experiences where we've designed the simulations to be integrated into a classroom. They can stand alone, but are best experienced when they're integrated with existing curriculum. What's important here is, and some of you might be wondering a couple of things, we're not testing children starting in the earliest grades. Students are self-reporting their interest themes, and I'll share one of the ways that we do that. What's important is that every child, every grade, every year has an opportunity to explore a career in each of the RIASEC theme areas. So we know that most people are a combination of 2 or 3 themes, but in the early grades, a child might just identify with one of the themes. Maybe it's realistic, hands-on doing. Well, we want that child to focus on realistic. We want them to continue to have exploration in the other themes so they get to explore and understand. Themes are going to change in the earliest grades. Students understand that better than anyone, by the way. They'll talk about it in some of our videos. Oh, my themes might change. It's okay. We'll wait and see how they evolve. I'm not an adult yet. But that doesn't diminish their interest in exploring the themes that they're claiming at the moment. To me, it's the most wonderful example of agentic striving, of really having that student voice and agency. And it's our wonderful teachers that are doing this work. It really, and the leadership of our principals. So every child, every grade, every year. These careers, it's not about the job, by the way. So some of you might be looking at this grid and saying, oh, this career isn't interesting at all, or this isn't going to be around in the future. Well, it's not about the career in a sense. It's more so about the child stepping into the career, exploring, simulating, meeting a pro, and then having a reflection to say, does that sound like me or not? What are the strengths, interests, and values that the person in the job would need to possess in order to be happy with their work, fulfilled with their work, excited about their work? And that starts to begin kind of this process of understanding self and understanding the world around them. Again, if anyone has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and I'll try to answer them. Hopefully this is making sense. So we've got the mission of me, we've got the framework, we have the careers. These are all in digital and physical resources that we've created. And actually we've created a lot of resources because these resources didn't exist, including Reader's Theater and career cards and strengths, interest, and values cards. But that idea, again, is to ground in the RIASEC. Many of these are our students, by the way. I think one of the photos isn't one of our students. But our students are simulating. They're using realia. They're acting out in the classroom. They're participating in experiences. They're having the opportunity to reflect. They're meeting professionals. This is the work. And this is play. This is fun. I have some teachers that tell me, I don't want to go to recess. I want to continue doing wow time. And a lot of that is because of our wonderful coaches. And I've listed, there's 2 of our coaches here, Chris Collins all the way to the left. Lauren Rhodes there was a former coach, and she's moved back into the classroom. She had the opportunity to work with her kids, which was amazing. She's an incredible coach. And then Melly Brandt to the right of Lauren, and then a principal and assistant superintendent in a neighboring school district that we've been supporting to roll out the world of work in their community, thanks to some partners at the ASA Foundation. So follow them on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, follow them on Twitter, because they are just amazing at the work they're doing. So and they're constantly in classrooms. They're always designing. Again, follow them on Twitter. So to give you because sometimes folks, well, how does it look in a school year? And then I'm going to get into how we self-report. But if we look at a school year, and again, teachers do this in lots of, let's just say that we look, this is a timeline of the start of the school year to winter break. And if teachers have never done this work before, we invite them to explore the RIASEC for themselves, probably participate in one of our assessments, like the Super Strong from Vita Navis, a valid and reliable and empirically based assessment. And then we invite students to self-report their themes for weeks, maybe it's months, until the teacher is comfortable with the language, until the students are comfortable with the language. The students can start self-reporting and claiming and seeing the language. And perhaps right before fall break, trying a level 2, maybe participating in one of the simulations, perhaps participating in a Meet a Pro, bring someone to the classroom, and then go on break and reflect and think about what went well, what didn't go well, how can we improve the practice, et cetera, how can we be better integrated. But leaving time at the beginning to self-report is really important, just grounding the language and understanding where your students are. A lot of teachers then will come out of that fall break kind of ready to go, integrating it, finding a place for it along the calendar, and we'll give it another shot. And then just before going into winter break, inviting the students to self-report once again. And I put this, this is back office data from the Super Strong assessment, the Vita Navis tool, where you can see how did students' assessment scores differ, and which are the dominant themes and which are the less dominant themes. And knowing these things, how can we focus on the areas that are less dominant? How might we be able to ensure, especially in the early grades, that we raise exposure for artistic and enterprising and conventional because they are lesser themes? I see realistic is a little bit lesser here as well. When you self-report at the beginning, you track the students to see how they're trending. You self-report again in the winter, and then, well, you're not going to be able to see my next slide because I had the rest of the year here. I'm so sorry about that. It looks like it's covered. I had some animations in this deck, so that's why it's not showing. Nevertheless, you can imagine from this point on, the attempt to try to integrate 4 other experiences. So maybe realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And then at the end of the year, kind of truing up and having that opportunity once again to have your students self-report and see how are they doing, what has changed, stay the same. And I'll never forget a kindergarten teacher. They had some themes that were very dominant and some themes that weren't very dominant. And the teacher said, by the end of the year, by focusing on those less dominant interest themes, she was able to true up the class and other interests developed. And I think that was a win. That was an incredible win. So our goal is not to keep students in their area of interest necessarily or drive them so deeply, but it really is about give them equal exposure across all themes. And if they're super excited about particular areas, of course, drive lessons and differentiate and focus as needed. So, okay, so we're already at 12:35, and I'm going to do my best to move through a little bit here. But here's one of the ways that we self-report. And of course, we've created a lot of custom materials. Some of our teachers have created materials too, like Miss Glaw in kindergarten. But imagine that we give all students this wonderful document, depending on their grade levels, obviously grade appropriate. I've added a bit.ly link of the University of Buffalo RSA animated videos. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but we use those videos to self-report quite a bit. And you can slow down the pace of those videos. They're about 1 minute in length. You can slow down the videos to 50% speed. You can put them on mute. I've used them in first grade. I've used them with seniors. I'm providing coaching across the lifespan. So I've used lots of the tools in lots of age-appropriate manners. And then here's an example of one of the RSA Animate videos, kind of the final slide already built out. But sometimes I'll have students do a gallery walk where they just articulate the words and the sites that they see in each of the pictures. What are the sounds? What's happening? What are the words? I have them go all the way around the RIASEC just as a gallery walk. And then at the end, I'll ask them to kind of claim their themes. Which 2 or 3 best described you? And that's an opportunity for them to self-report, whether using the videos to self-report, on mute, slow down, or just play them as is, and then give your students the opportunity to claim, list your top RIASEC themes. What were they? And then from there, even with the adults, you can see they start writing out, they start jotting, they start capturing. And from that place, once they have identified their themes, then you can take them to a RIASEC rotation. And this is Miss Brandt from our district, one of our WOW coaches. This week, she's been working on RIASEC rotations or centers at home. So after the students reflect and claim, imagine having rotations in your classroom or at home that are activities, maybe work-based learning, PBLs, project-based learning, in each of the RIASEC themes. So allow them then to go and have a hands-on experience. We do this with parents as well. And then give them the opportunity to reflect again based on that experience. Do you think realistic really aligns to your interests? Why or why not? Tell me about your experience. How did it feel when you were going through that? Tell me about did you have success going through that? Did it come easy to you? So you go from self-reporting to rotations, and maybe you do it a couple times in your classroom, and then you set yourself off for the school year, off into the calendar. Okay, what challenges did I overcome? I see a question in the question box. What challenges did you overcome to get teachers on board with the WOW themes? We started, we always use the airline analogy. If when you're on a plane, you know, if the airplane loses cabin pressure, a tiny bag will fall from the ceiling. Please apply it to yourselves first and then apply it to others. It was really important to take the teachers through a process of their own career development. Many of them have never sat down and had a career development conversation. Many do not know what the RIASEC is. They've never had exposure to strengths. And they're in the human development business. So when you take them through a process to understand themselves, and then you show them the data of what's happening in the world of work, whether it's student loan debt or the gap in employment or dropout rates or the opportunity youth that I showed earlier, the zip code destiny, you start to build a case for teachers to want to try. And there are some teachers who will never, I think, may never try. There are a lot of teachers who were early adopters who said, this is really interesting, I want to add this to my craft. And there are some teachers who sit back and wait and see, and they come along very slowly. And some come along much more quickly. So principal leadership is important, but I've had many teachers now tell me 3 years into this journey, thank you for gifting me with the world of work and specifically the RIASEC, because it's given me a new lens to understand my students and to understand them very quickly. It's also given me an opportunity to see my students be nicer to each other, because as they understand that each of their classmates is unique and special, not everyone has the same RIASEC configuration, but they're starting to understand the value of each other. And that's what Dr. Bluestein noticed when he came to our schools, and that concept of that protective factor against bullying and other things that happen, where when students see the value in each other and in themselves, it's very powerful. I thank you for your question. I hope I answered it. So we've self-reported, and there's lots of ways to self-report. I just gave you one way. I do believe in the rotations and what Ms. Brandt has done. Again, we do this with the adults, with the parents, because we take the parents through the exact same process. This is a 2-generational strategy. And at first, I didn't think that the parents were going to buy in. I was nervous, and we tried, and we couldn't get the parents to stop in the activities and the rotations, which was really interesting. And the feedback from most of the parents was, I wish I'd had this when I was a kid. And of course, we all wish that we would have had this when we were kids. How many of us struggled on our journeys? When did we ever sit down? Was it in college for some of us or not? You know, school was really hard for me, and this really understanding this language and falling into human resources changed my life. What would be the minimum age to use WOW is a question that was just posted. Well, originally we only started with WOW in kindergarten, and then transitional kindergarten got upset. So we had to start creating some resources for TK. So I really think it depends on the students. Know your child, but starting from an early age, are you playing with Realia in your classrooms? Many of our TK classrooms have little kitchens and they have little stations. Well, why not put the enterprising over the kitchen? Maybe it's the artistic, or maybe it's a couple themes. Students can start learning from very early age, and I'll show you some photos of this here in a moment. There's another question here. I'm teaching a course to university students on early career development this summer. I would like to have my students go through the process of self-exploration. Are your resources available outside of your school district? We have about 14 districts that are working with us currently. So if you either go to my Twitter handle and DM me, direct mail me, or go to my LinkedIn page, or I'll give you my email address before we finish up. You can message me and we can talk about that. I'm really interested in students exploring this, especially at the collegiate level. So let me show you some more. I hope this is interesting, you guys, by the way. I hope this is interesting. I don't think there's too many districts that are doing this around the world. So when we talk about classroom transformation, it could be the whole school. And here's one of our, thank you so much, Stephanie, for your comment there. There's lots of things that we're doing to transform our schools, but here are window clings in Spanish, Mundo del Trabajo. My family's from Ecuador, so I have particular interest in dual language. But here there are 4 levels of integration and the RIASEC, as you can see. So the schools are starting to take on a brand new kind of ownership of this work, and classrooms are being transformed. In fact, in the bottom right, those are kindergartners speaking to an assistant superintendent from another district about the RIASEC. And that went on for about 3 minutes. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that, where students didn't want to stop talking about their interest themes, and specifically the RIASEC. But all the accolades go to the teacher, the educators. They are brilliant. Our teachers are brilliant. And this will change lives for our students. But as you can see, teachers are creating spaces and areas for students. And I'm giving you some Twitter handles here. I hope you will follow these teachers. Send them a shout out, especially during this time. Miss Thomas is incredible. You can see her video on my YouTube channel, but we start with language in kindergarten. Here she is teaching conventional. I had teachers say to me, Ed, I think we should really change enterprising persuaders. I don't think students can say persuaders. Then I went to that teacher's open house, and all the students, this was first grade, all the students are talking to their parents about enterprising persuaders. They absolutely understand the language. We as adults, we're going to get in the way of the students learning. So be much more confident about what your students can do than what they cannot do, because they will blow your minds. Many of these things I'd never seen before. No one has seen before. I said, Dr. Bluestein came to, and he saw kindergartners doing this work at Anza Elementary. He's like, I've never seen this before. And it was incredible. And the teachers are incredible. So how about anchor charts? I went to Australia to speak at NCDA. At NCDA, is that right? I don't know. The Career Development Association, CDA, Career Development Association of Australia. Forgive me. In September, and I was FaceTiming with Miss Shelly Smith's first graders. And I sent pictures because we saw sharks and then we saw kangaroos. Well, they developed anchor charts. If you can see on the whiteboard, Mrs. Smith, amazing, incredible teacher. The students created anchor charts around the strengths or the interests of the shark. So they applied the RIASEC themes to the kangaroos and to the sharks. And please follow Miss Smith. She's amazing. There's so many amazing teachers at Rios Robots across the district, 28 schools. Please, please, please follow our teachers. So that's one example of anchor charts. Miss Wolzen, second grade teacher at Magnolia Elementary. These are more anchor charts aligned to the themes. I see another question. This is excellent information. It seems very Avid-like. Wondering if you've talked to them. This is quite the product package. Educators struggle to embrace how of career awareness and development, Kate. Thank you for your comments, Kimberly. It's different than Avid. I think Avid is great work. this is really about building identity, I think, of students and giving them the language in order to find their place in the world. So a little bit different, but I think I see the connection. I've spoken to the AVID folks as well. I'll show you an integration of the RIASEC. I saw that question from Burkhan, yeah. This is an example right here, actually. This is second grade. Teachers are comparing and contrasting all the time. So let's compare and contrast. And it's in Spanish. This is at Bostonia Language Academy. Let's compare and contrast enterprising with realistic. Teachers are doing compare and contrast naturally in the classrooms, right? This is part of their part of what's happening already in school. Now we build in the language of interest, the RIASEC and enterprise, the RIASEC, enterprising, and realistic, and they can look at what's different and what's similar. Isn't that perfect? The Venn diagram. It's perfect. Compare and contrast. There's integration. How about this? Third grade RIASEC integration. First time I ever went into a third grade classroom and saw the alignment of RIASEC to what the students were reading. They were reading Charlotte's Web, and the students started making natural connections between the RIASEC and the characters in Charlotte's Web. I went to the back of the classroom. I saw all the foam boards are up that we create. We create all the foam boards for the teachers. And as a child, and you can see the writing there of the students. And I think if I got it right, that if you know your Charlotte's Web, and I don't know it as well as I could, but I think it was that Wilbur negotiated with Templeton in order to save the egg sac. So Wilbur was enterprising because he persuaded Templeton to save the egg sac in order to save Charlotte. So I asked the teacher, who asked them, did you ask them to write this? And she said, no, the students started coming up with this on their own. They were writing out these ideas and making these connections to the RIASEC based on what they were reading. Birkin just mentioned, I believe that teachers play a very critical role in our students' career development more than their counselors, because students see their teachers as role models and see each other every day. Most definitely, teachers have 180 days to develop a relationship with a child. It's very hard for the counselor to do the same. So for the teacher to have the language is critically important. And once the teacher has the language, understands the students from the lens of strengths, interests, and values, then we have a completely different environment, conversations, etc. So I couldn't agree with you more. And we need our counselors. We should be valuing our counselors more. But the teacher is in the classroom, and it's not about content. It should not be about test scores. It should be about developing the human, every child unique and special. Please keep those questions coming. This was another beautiful way that it was integrated. This is a fifth grade teacher from Madison Elementary. First time I ever saw this, I was doing a walkthrough, and the students are reading the Lemonade Wars. They're identifying and having open conversation about the characters' RIASEC themes within the story. And at the end, the teacher says, now every student take a Post-it note, jot down your top theme based on what you've learned about the themes and the characters in the book. And I want you to go up and put your Post-it note next to the RIASEC foam board that is most aligned to your theme. And that way she got to see, well, where are my students' interests focused? Where are they the largest number of interests? And it's just, again, it's another way to level set and understand, where are my students' interests tracking? So if everyone's tracking realistic, investigative, how do we get some more social artistic experiences? Let's move to those simulations from the system. Can I bring in some more professionals? Is it a gender thing? Is it a race thing? Who can I bring in from the world of work, knowing my students, to be able to open their eyes to those possibilities? I hope this is all interesting, you guys. How about an all grades RIASEC themed career fair? That just makes sense. I just saw this about a month ago. Amazing integrated. Huge props to the principal and teachers there at Rancho San Diego. They had the most incredible RIASEC themed career fair. There are several HR professionals. They asked me, what's happening here? Well, let me talk to you about the RIASEC. The HR people don't always know about the RIASEC and interests. As soon as I explained to them, they're like, oh my gosh, you're going to help me find talent that aligns to my needs. This is a big deal. Is anyone else doing this? So I explained the story, but So imagine here we are doing these RIASEC integrations. Here's the career fair. And then this was at Bostonia Language Academy. Basically the same thing. Imagine this. This young lady that you see here, they had been studying carpintero, carpenters, right? Realistic hands-on doers. It turns out she knew this was going to be happening the next day. She went home the day before and she drew out a schematic of a house that she wanted to build. And she brought it in the next day to show to the carpenters. And she wore overalls because she knew that she was going to be participating in the carpenter experience. Do you think this young lady understands her themes? Do you think that having this process and teacher scaffolding up these experiences and exposures and claiming it, owning it, incredibly powerful. I see these things every day. I wish I could invite you to my schools. If any of you ever want to come, please do. And I want to share with you that not all of our experiences are live. In 2 years, I have to change that number quite often because we use Nepris. They're a partner of ours. But in 2 years, our students have achieved more than 70,000 student views of live industry chats using the MetaPro platform through Nepris. So we have created meaning for their technology in that when students have an exploration, a simulation, and then they meet a pro, the richness of dialogue that happens even virtually through Zoom is unbelievable. I've gone into many first grade classrooms where I'm like, this may not go well. These first graders are about to meet with a civil engineer. This could be a complete disaster. And then each one of these little humans goes up because the teacher worked with them on the questions and they ask the engineer the question on the Zoom platform via their laptop. And I'm sitting there like, what just happened? It's incredible. So if you have questions, we can talk about that. Don't forget about classroom jobs, ladies and gentlemen, because we have amazing teachers, Miss Fryer, Miss Copeland, now assistant principal, but they are, they encourage that, you know, we have all these classroom jobs that need to be done. Why not align them to the RIASEC and then have students interview and apply for the classroom jobs? And if a student's unsure, how about if they become an intern to one of the other students who's already in a job? So there's so many ways. And at the end of the day, of course, integrating a curriculum, this was an earlier conversation from Berkan, but you're going to have to teach science, right? Birth of rocks, energy. This is Miss Brandt's curriculum from 4th grade before she became a WOW coach. You're going to be teaching these things. What tools are you using? We use Mystery Science, very useful technology to teach science, science reading, etc. Well, which of the world of work careers from the grid would align to these science standards? And then what additional links? And of course, she went out and created some things. She used some of our own materials. Same with social studies. We're going to study reflections of where we live, or California Indian peoples and management. So then you align the careers, and then you build out a scope and sequence on when you're going to bring in the pros. Are any of my parents professionals in these areas? Can I bring them to the classroom? Do I make a request through Nepris, etc.? And that's when you get kids doing stuff like this, asking the superintendent, because you have the same RIASEC themes as the superintendent, can I do a shadow day? Sammy was a 5th grader. He's now a 6th grader. Or you see table tents in classrooms. I think this is a 3rd grade, Piper. So it's taking on a life of its own. The MetaPro chats are great through Nepris. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or DM me on Twitter. My email is hidalgoe@cajonvalley.net, hidalgoe@cajonvalley.net. Perhaps I can type it in the bottom here, hidalgoe@cajonvalley. I wonder if you guys can see this, .net. I don't think you can see that. Maybe I'll send it out, see what happens. I don't think I can do it, you guys. So maybe Alicia will send it out to you. She has your contact information, so she can get you in touch with me. I have some more to share, but I can also stop there and just take more questions. I know you've been fielding them. I've been fielding them as we've been going. I will share a couple more things then. I don't see any more questions. So values. This is a values sort. So we create our own value sort. You know, and darn it, the picture didn't show up here, but I have this video of second graders sorting their values. It's unbelievable. Julia from Indian Prairie Schools, Miss Nordstrom. You know, you can follow Tera Nordstrom or Kalishaw Koalas or Principal Ken Bonono out of Chicago. But these students get it. They're like, because we just do a very simple values like me and not like me. And they sort the cards and they cut them out and they paste them on their poster boards. And they know the values that are not them. I want to work with night people. That's a value. I don't want to work alone. That's not a value. Working alone, not a value. They understand it from these early ages. And the more we get them involved with the language, it's just so much easier for them to start then having conversations with people. We don't give them the language. Everything Dr. Zavikas had talked about. I'm sorry, the photo didn't load, so I can't show you Miss Nordstrom's work, but I believe it's on my YouTube channel, or you DM me, I'll send it to you. The same thing about strengths. Miss Shelly Smith, she integrated GLAD strategies with our strengths resources. And for 2 weeks, I've been saying, well, the important thing about strengths, because that's how she uses the GLAD strategy, and this is how she articulates it with her students. The important thing about strengths is that they name what we are good at. And then she reads out, we all have unique strengths that allow us to share what we are good at with those around us. Great teams are created when each person uses a different strength that complements the strengths of each of other team members. And then the whole class says, but the important thing about strengths is they name what we are good at. And those are just two mini examples. I really want to spend most of my time on interest today, but I also don't want to let you go without seeing, if you're not doing this work with your parents, you're not doing the work. So parents have to be involved in the process. Don't be afraid of the parents. You know the research around parents and career development of their kids and who's going to help them make their first choices. These are parents. This is our amazing family and community engagement office. We translate our work in Arabic, Farsi, Spanish, and other languages. These family community engagement team members, Omar here, incredible. These are all family members of ours. They're all learning about their RIASEC themes. And then they go off and they build their own me trees, and they integrate strengths, interests, and values into their me trees. And now they start having conversations with their children about their possible selves, their future possible selves. And then the students are creating me trees, and it's all integrated. And the students are speaking the same language with their parents. And that's probably some of the most fulfilling of all the work that we've done. And I'll finish out with just a little bit of data, because you guys probably like data. I hope you like data. So we're studying future possible selves. We're on a 3-year longitudinal study. I actually haven't shown this data yet. It just came out. We're in our year 2 of our study. We have the largest sample group of middle school students' possible selves data ever collected. And in 1 year over year, we took our middle school students from 75% of them being able to identify a specific possible self, an actual career, and how we're coding this, a lot of coding, a lot of hard work that went into this, to 94% of students being able to identify a future possible self. We're pretty excited about that data. We're seeing teachers, because we're studying teachers at the same time, 186 teachers in the sample group. From year 1 to year 2, you can see their progression. It's not easy at first. It's brand new language. But now you can see how teachers are getting more comfortable with the work across each of the levels. And maybe most important are these growth numbers around teachers' beliefs, because we're studying teachers' beliefs. Number one, that career development matters. 95% of the teachers in our sample group, 186 teachers, that teachers in schools should play a role in career development, and that WOW improves the classroom experience and learning. So anyways, that was a lot to do in a short period of time. I'm so sorry that I gave you so much, but I feel like I need to tell the whole story, and I tried to answer your questions at the same time. I think you're good. Yes, you'll have a copy of the presentation. Don't attribute your stuff now, footnote your stuff, okay? Don't be calling it your own. Footnote it, because really the footnoting goes back to the teachers. You saw how I honored the teachers, educators in the schools. They're the ones who are doing the great work. But this is all trademarked. We've protected it because we put in a huge investment. So we would love to help other school districts or teachers learn how to do this, and we're training them. So we partner with the Myers-Briggs company, and they're great partners. And anyways, Alicia can help you get in touch with me or go to Twitter or wherever you need to go. But thank you for all the comments, and I hope that was helpful and useful and interesting.
Thank you, Ed, again for this presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I know, like Ed said at the beginning, times are a little tough on everyone right now with everything going on. So we appreciate you all joining us today. This webinar was recorded. I will be sending out a link to Ed's PowerPoint presentation as well as a link to the recording, and then I'll include any other resources he wants to send me and his contact information for you guys as well. It does take a couple of days for the recording link to be processed, so beginning of next week is when you can expect that, as well as information on how to get your continuing education. So thank you, Ed, for joining us today, and thank you to everybody else.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.